So anyway, we were watching this, and my wife didn't know anything about the Alamo. And I was like, oh yeah, they all died there. And she's like, well, what's going on? And I'm like, well, Texas was its own country. And she's like, what? So I don't know what they've been teaching people in these schools these days, but Texas was its own country.
I can assure you that I have knowledge of the school that your wife went to for secondary and primary school, and they did in fact teach that Texas was its own country.
Welcome to Nice Ashes. Join hosts Mike and Nate for cigars and culture. Let's go beyond the smoke.
What are we smoking today, Nate?
We are smoking the Hoya del Jefe Centenial Reserve, which is a long and skinny cigar.
It smells good, which is not a very good indicator, but the cap tasted well.
Yep.
So we're radically changing directions on some of these truly cheap cigars.
Yes. It does also have 1890 on the label here. So presumably, I don't know, when the company was founded or something.
With these cheap cigars, I don't think it means anything.
It was a year we heard about, and it looked good on the label.
According to AI, it was a year that happened.
Yes. You don't even need AI for that. You heard about that AI company that got filed for bankruptcy because it turned out it was, like 700 Indians instead of actual AI?
No, I did not.
Okay. It was backed, I don't know if it was backed by Microsoft. It was backed by one of the big companies here in the U.S., and it turned out just to be like a room full of Indian men answering all the questions and stuff.
Dude, that is India in a nutshell. I love it. I love it.
Yes.
I recently read about the AI program that was trying to bribe the people interacting with it to protect itself because it thought it was going to get shut down.
Oh,
they prompted it. Yeah.
I just heard another one, too, where the AI actively was rewriting its programming to avoid being shut down.
Yeah, that is the exact scary shit that people were talking about, you know?
Yeah, sweet. Man-made horrors beyond my comprehension.
Yeah. This is, listen, people, we're at the start of that novel, unfortunately.
Yes. I wish we weren't, but here we are. If it was the start of the novel where AI could do my laundry and my dishes, and I could do my creative things, that would be fantastic. But that's not the novel that we're in, I'm afraid.
No, I don't think we're even in Ghost in the Shell, you know?
Yeah, we don't even get like hot cyborg women. So what are you going to do? I don't know.
Yeah.
Mike, I mentioned this, I don't know, a couple episodes ago. It's tough to say really now. I feel I'm unstuck in time, and my name is Billy Pilgrim. But I mentioned this, that I was going to have a similar topic as one of your topics, in a sense. And we were talking about conspiracy theories, and we've been kind of talking about those throughout this season, which is fun. And this one started from not really a conspiracy theory, but from Disney. This episode topic, and so we're going to talk about some of the shortest lived countries. Is our topic. And the way I got here is very strange. It's very strange, but you know me, so it's probably not that strange to you. A couple weeks ago, my wife and I were looking for something to watch on the old TV, a movie to watch. And she said, well, fire up Disney Plus and let's see what's on there and let's see what's going on. And we were looking through the different genres, and I was like, oh, Davy Crockett, King of the Wild Frontier. And then right next to it, of course, was Davy Crockett, King of the River Pirates. Or Davy Crockett and the River Pirates, sorry. And the backstory is that I grew up only ever watching Davy Crockett, King of the Wild Frontier, which is the first movie. And my wife grew up only ever seeing Davy Crockett and the River Pirates. And we have a similar experience with, I grew up watching An American Tail and An American Tail Fievel Goes West, because American Tail is the first one, Fievel Goes West is the second one. But my wife grew up only ever seeing Fievel Goes West, so I showed her An American Tail, and she's like, wow, I had no idea there was a first movie and all this stuff, and she had no idea there was a first Davy Crockett movie, and she had never seen it. And so I was like, well, let's do a double feature tonight. Let's do Davy Crockett, King of the Wild Frontier, and Davy Crockett, River Pirates. And I had told her, I was like, when you told me, after we first met at some point, you told me Davy Crockett and the River Pirates, and I'm like, that came out the year after Davy Crockett, but in Davy Crockett, King of the Wild Frontier, Davy Crockett goes to the Alamo and dies. So how is there a sequel? how is there a sequel? And it turns out the sequel is a prequel. But the movie is from, David Crockett is from like 1950 or 1951. And David Crockett River Pirates is like 52 or whatever. So it's the year after.
Sure.
So anyway, we were watching this, and my wife didn't know anything about the Alamo. And I was like, oh yeah, they all died there. And she's like, well, what's going on? And I'm like, well, Texas was its own country. And she's like, what? So I don't know what they've been teaching people in these schools these days, but Texas was its own country.
I can assure you that I have knowledge of the school that your wife went to for secondary and primary school, and they did in fact teach that Texas was its own country. I can assure you that it was part of the curriculum.
Yes. And to be fair, we're up north and everyone went to school up north. So we don't really care. I mean, we care, but we don't really care about.
Yeah. We don't care about the Republic of California or the Republic of Texas or whatever.
I mean, Texas doesn't matter. Whatever. Right? So Texas was a country for about 10 years, from March 2nd, 1836 to February 19th, 1846. They had a revolution and gained independence. The United States was hesitant to recognize them as a country, as were a lot of European powers, but Texas did have trade agreements with a lot of different countries, and they were annexed by the United States on December 29th, 1845, and admitted to the Union as the 28th state on that day, which made Mexico pretty upset and led to the Mexican-American War, and yada, yada, everything is fine now. So that is good. But that's kind of what kicked me off into, like, well, 10 years, that's not a very long time. And in my research, 10 years actually is quite a long time for being a country.
Yeah, South America had a lot of short-lived countries there for a while.
Well, we're going to get into it,
Bolivian
Mike.
Revolution. Yeah.
We're going to get into it. What do you think of your first few puffs of this cigar?
I like it. I think it's fine. It's not usually our usual flavor, but yeah, it's medium-bodied and pleasant. So
yes, nothing bitter. No acetone or anything like that.
No,
that's good. I also want to note, Mike. And I don't know if anyone cares. I'm sure Keith does. But my little tablet that I have, it's a Samsung Tab. I don't know. It's old, right? Like it's an old one. But I guess I didn't shut it down from last week when we recorded, and it's still got 56% battery. So that's pretty good, I guess.
Yeah, that's incredible.
Because I just kept it closed, right? You know, and it goes into its power save mode or whatever it does. But
well, I can tell you that I was over at your house recently.
Yes,
and
you were.
My phone did not come out of my pocket, and it was at 100% when I arrived, and I was at 85% when I left, and it's brand new.
Yeah. Well, a lot of that is like it's searching for signal and stuff. So the first country I want to talk about, shortest lived countries. And Mike, you can tell me if you've heard of any of these. I feel like you might have heard of more of these than I, being a history buff. The Great Republic of Rough and Ready, which sounds like a couple...
Definitely
like
not. That sounds...
Okay, like a couple 12-year-olds got together and they're like, what are we going to call our country? Yeah. Rough and Ready. Tell your mom we're rough and ready.
We're rough and ready. It sounds like Teddy Roosevelt.
Yeah, kind of. So this one is... about an hour northeast out of Sacramento. And there's a town called Rough and Ready, California. Current population is about 1,000. But back in 1849, there was at least 3 times that many people living there, and they were working at mining gold. And it was part of the California Gold Rush. And there's a new mining tax that was imposed, and the people of Rough and Ready, California, did not like that. So Colonel E.F. Brundage read out a manifesto at a mass meeting. He declared a new nation independent of both California and the United States federal government, dubbed the Great Republic of Rough and Ready. They elected Brundage as its president and set about creating new laws. So 12 weeks later, on July 4th, the young republic called it quits because it was too much work to run a country, and reunited with California and the United States of America. And it says it's unreported if the miners end up having to pay the new tax that they revolted over. So that was a 12-week country. Again, that's like, I don't know that it was given official sanction by anybody, 12 weeks, but especially in that era where it probably, by the time Washington, D.C. heard of it, it was already done, right?
They probably heard of it when it was done as a little blurb, some U.S. Marshal wrote a note. Yeah.
Yes. But, that's kind of like the frontiersman being frontiersman almost kind of thing. You got like the John Wayne character. He doesn't want to follow the rules, so he creates his own little John Wayne town and what have you.
Right, and then Kirk Douglas shows up, and he's like, you guys are lazy fucks.
Yeah, you got to get back in the good graces of the God-given United States. And they're like, yeah. 12 weeks later, of course. But the next one is the Republic of Ezo, E-Z-O. It might be Ezo. I don't know. Tough to say. I'm not a pronunciationologist. I'm just a podcaster rater. That's right. Okay, so for about 700 years, Japan was ruled by a military dictator known as the shogun, and the role of emperor was basically just ceremonial. In 1868, a group of disgruntled nobles and court officials convinced Emperor Meiji, M-E-I-J-I.
Yep.
To take back power. The sitting shogun abdicated, but when he later decided to fight back, a civil war began. The emperor's forces defeated the shoguns, and in January 1869, a remnant of the shogun's fleet retreated to Ezo, Japan, which is their northmost island, them being an archipelago, of course. And there, with the help of a French military advisor, why are the French always involved in all these revolutions and things? The admiral of the fleet, Enomoto Takayaki, established the Ezo Republic. The Constitution of Ezo was based on that of the U.S., and recognized universal suffrage for all members of the samurai caste, which is their military caste. And for this reason, the Republic of Ezo is sometimes regarded as the first example of democratic governance in Japan. But in spring of 1869, the imperial forces arrived, and by the end of June, which would be 151 days into the newborn republic's resistance, the imperial forces overwhelmed it. And the Japanese islands were consolidated under the Meiji Restoration, and Ezo was renamed Hokkaido.
It's like one of my favorite genres is Japanese anime taking place in the Meiji era. There's a lot of interesting culture clash and radical technologies, and the feudal order being overtaken by the might of industrialization. It's a very interesting time.
Oh, it's
to read
very
about.
Fascinating.
Yeah, very cool, very cool. And of course, everybody. I mean, Japan's a very stable country now, so all the records are there, and it was stable then as well, and it's wonderful. As far as entertainment goes.
You ready for the next one, Mike?
Oh yes.
Again, this is I don't know why I choose these episodes where I have to pronounce things like this, because again, I'm a reader and not a pronouncer. But whatever. Biak na Batu. In the 1890s, Filipinos were growing increasingly sick of being ruled by the faraway and despotic Spain. So they wanted to be independent. And of course, this provoked the Spanish to suppress the independence movement, and that suppression then led to everyone living peacefully. No, I'm kidding. A full-blown revolution, of course. In 1897, the Spanish troops closed in on the leader of the revolution, Emilio Aguinaldo. He slipped through enemy lines with 500 men and disappeared into a wild region called Biak-na-Bato. There, Emilio declared the formation of the Republic of Biak-na-Bato and issued a series of proclamations, chief among them being independence from Spain. I had no idea, Mike, we could just run into the woods and declare independence. Is that still a thing?
Mikeopolis is, the name of my compound.
Yes. Anyway, this Emilio guy had a lot of support from the people in the Philippines. That the Spanish realized that they might be able to overwhelm them militarily. They couldn't destroy the movement itself. So they ended up negotiating, and in the end, Emilio agreed to exile himself to Hong Kong in return for money and political concessions, and the Republic of Biak-na-Bato lasted 44 days. The sidebar of that, or the skip ahead end note to that, is in 1898, the United States seized the Philippines from Spain. Emilio returned, but his hopes for the Republic were dashed because the U.S. essentially took Spain's place as a colonial power, and the Filipinos didn't win their independence until 1946. How about the Palmetto Republic, Mike?
Never heard of it.
Palmetto is a small palm tree, and they grow in warm places like South Carolina. And back in 1860, when Abraham Lincoln was running for president, South Carolina was a committed states' rights state. I'm sorry, slave-holding state. That didn't like the sound. That didn't like the sound of Lincoln's plans to limit slavery. States' rights. Nope, slavery in the United States. So South Carolina threatened to secede if he became president, and South Carolina made good on that promise in December of 1860 in the wake of Lincoln's election, becoming the first state to secede from the Union. The people who seceded declared themselves an independent country known as the Palmetto Republic. This was actually the second Palmetto Republic. The good people of Carolina had declared the first one about 100 years earlier in 1776 in the lead up to the Revolutionary War. But the Second Palmetto Republic didn't plan on going it alone for long, and they persuaded other slave-holding states to secede as well. In 1861, South Carolina and 6 other states created the Confederacy, at which point the Second Palmetto Republic had endured for just 2 months. About the Juliana Republic, Mike.
Stumped again.
I got you this episode. All right. 1820s, Brazil declared itself independent of Portugal and established the Brazilian Empire with free waxes for everybody. They also had an emperor, I guess, but the waxing is why people came. In the 1830s, there were people in the southern end of the empire that were growing restless over grievances like, high taxes on their salted beef products, and they started a Republican resistance known as the Ragamuffin War. And Ragamuffin was a reference to the fringes on the clothes worn by the gauchos. An Italian military leader exiled from Europe for fomenting. The Italian military leader guy wanted to support these ragamuffins, and with the Brazilian gauchos and the Italian forces, they had a bunch of military successes. The ragamuffins declared the Juliana Republic an independent country in July of 1839, but they're overrun by imperial forces just 4 months later. So I'm sensing a trend of like imperial forces coming and squashing a lot of these things.
It's been a trend.
Yes, indeed. The Russian Democratic Federative Republic. This is a contender for the absolute shortest. There's one other contender for absolute shortest, but this one it's up there. January 19th, 1918, the Russian Democratic Federative Republic was founded midday and dissolved before bedtime.
As happens when you're doing a revolution against totalitarian hereditary
Do your
monarchy.
revolution before breakfast or after breakfast?
I just skip it. That way you get a little head start on the imperialist forces.
Yeah, I mean, if I do a revolution before or after breakfast, when do I do my workout, When do I drink my hazy IPA so I can mispronounce everything?
Well, fuck, you got to get your gains in.
There were a lot of people fighting for power in that area at the time. Russia-ish, right? The fucking Bolsheviks and everything. The chief Bolshevik himself, Vladimir Lenin, rose and delivered a 2-hour address explaining how bourgeois the assembly was. There's another country, and it was the USSR. So it was kind of around that time. How many more do you want to do before we do a cigar check? Do you want to do 1 or 2 more before we do a cigar check?
Let's do 2.
Okay, sure. It's a long cigar. Lengthy, as they say. Have you heard of the Faroe Islands, Mike? And that's not Pharaoh like Egyptian pharaohs.
It's Pharaoh.
Yeah, Faroe.
Yes.
So they're, kind of in between Norway and Iceland. Norway ruled the Faroes for centuries, but in the 1800s, Denmark gained control of the islands. Isn't Denmark going to be the 51st state?
Greenland.
Or is that Canada? Greenland.
Greenland,
okay.
yeah.
We're going to have 53. How are we going to fit that many stars on the flag? I don't know. Okay. Let's think practically, people. We've got to redesign the flag now. So Denmark gained control of the islands, and the Danish wanted to impose their language on the Faroe Islands, but they had their own language and culture. So in 1946, the local parliament of the Faroe Islands held a referendum in which the population voted for independence, and a country was born. But fate had other plans for them, because 2 days later, the Danish government dissolved the Faroe Parliament and called a general election. They elected a parliament that negotiated a settlement that continued the archipelago's relationship with Denmark, but awarded them greater autonomy. So they, gambled it all to gain a little. And so 2 days they lasted. The People's Republic of Zanzibar. And Zanzibar is where you go if you want the finest goods in all the land. So it sounds, right?
I thought it was a really good level in Halo 1.
That as well, but it feels like Zanzibar would be a place like a movie would sing about, like, oh, we went to Zanzibar for the finest silk and whatever.
Absolutely. I've actually heard of this one.
Okay. So it's another archipelago, and it's an African archipelago this time, known as Zanzibar. You guessed it. I said it. And there's a lot of different people that have tried to control these islands, and Zanzibar's popularity has more to do with its abundant spice harvest, E.Z. Harkonnens, its tropical climate, and it's got some really good beaches, I guess. But it's right off the coast of present-day Tanzania. So the Persians, the Chinese, the Arabs, the Portuguese, and British have all wielded varying degrees of influence over the islands. In 1963, the United Kingdom ceded its hold on the place to a constitutional monarchy under the Sultan of Zanzibar. But in 1964, 2 political parties joined forces to overthrow the Sultan in something known now as the Zanzibar Revolution. The leader of one of the parties, Abid Karume, was appointed president of the newly formed People's Republic of Zanzibar. By the end of April, Karume had negotiated a merger with the mainland Tanganyika, forming the new country of Tanzania. So the People's Republic of Zanzibar lasted 104 days, which is pretty good since some of these are like 2 months and, one afternoon.
Yeah, a lot of these are the next time a ship arrived from the mother country.
Yeah.
Magically, it was over.
Yeah. We're going to do a cigar check, though, because that's what we said.
Yes. I am about halfway through.
Yes,
and
me as well.
It's perfectly adequate. Perfectly adequate.
I literally have no complaints other than, it's maybe not exactly what we would smoke all the time. But otherwise, no complaints.
It's not as good as... It's moderate.
Were you going to say it's not as good as the cigar we're smoking next episode?
Yes.
Well, it's true. It's not. It's not as good as the cigar we're smoking next episode with a special guest, which we'll tell you about at the end of this episode.
And I'm very excited.
Yes. It will be a good episode. Okay. Republic of Connacht, let's say. Let's say that's how it's pronounced. 1798 revolution was in the air, even in the remote fastness of rural Ireland. The news had spread that the French had beheaded their king. They declared a republic founded on principles of liberty, fraternity, and equality. Is this the movie Moulin Rouge? No, that was Love. Sorry. Liberty, love, and the can-can. Okay, better yet, the American colonies had cast off the yoke of British rule. Hoorah. So we have a faction of Irish rebels known as the United Irishmen. By that time, the Irish had been under the thumb of the English throne for 600 years, and nobody can hold a grudge like an Irishman. The United Irishmen secured the support of the French military. Well, fuck. The French aren't the instigators, but goddamn, they're like the military for hire in these sort of things, aren't they?
Well, the French, they supported democracy after their revolution across the globe, unless it was Haiti. They weren't big fans of Haitian independence.
Well, Haiti doesn't have any oil.
Reasons.
Haiti doesn't have any oil. That's why.
Yeah. Had a lot of sugar, but not a lot of oil.
Not a lot of oil. What do you need sugar for in 1798? It's all oil, baby.
That's the petro industry. They got its roots in 1798.
All right, we can be tongue-in-cheek with a lot of this stuff. It's okay. These countries are long gone. They're not going to send agents to persecute us. So General Jean-Joseph Amable Humbert showed up with the promised troops to help out these Irish people. And together, the French and Irish forces won a major battle at Castlebar in County Mayo. But the British Viceroy of Ireland at the time was Lord Cornwallis. And you don't have to know anything about history, but I'm sure you've heard the name Lord Cornwallis. He was still pretty upset about everything that happened with old Georgie boy, old George Washington. It was General Cornwallis who surrendered to the colonial forces at Trenton, New Jersey, bringing the American War for Independence to an end. And the Viceroy wasn't about to endure the humiliation of losing another major colony. So he hired enough mercenaries to defeat the Irish rebellion, snuffing it out within just 12 days. So he had just gotten he just had to eat his hat, like recently. And somebody else was like, well, you ate one hat. Here's another hat. And he was like, absolutely not. Nothing to say about Cornwallis, Mike? I feel like that would be a person you would talk about.
I mean, historically speaking, Cornwallis and King George and all these British guys that in American lore are like these villains were pretty progressive for the time. Like, they weren't bad people, in a historical sense. So
sure, they were just on opposing sides of our history, right?
They were on the opposing side of the American history, and now we've been brainwashed into thinking that it was goodies versus baddies, when really it was just a bunch of rich fucks who didn't want to pay taxes.
Yeah, but the tax was like 3% or 3 pennies, which is like 7%, and now we're getting like 140%. Never mind, it's not about our current tariffs.
Yeah, it's not about the fact that if you buy a new fucking car, you're going to be paying 65% of your income into tax for a year. Nothing like that.
Yeah. But, throw the tea into the harbor for 3 cents. Saskatchewan. Have you heard of Saskatchewan, Mike?
I mean, I know of Saskatchewan. Yes. I did not know that they were an independent republic, but...
In the 19th century, the Canadian government extended its reach westward, and they had the railroad and the mounted police force, the Mounties, I've heard called, and they can drink a mean syrup. Indigenous groups sought to protect themselves from colonial encroachment on their land and rights. So the indigenous resistance movement became known as the Northwest Rebellion, and Louis Riel was one of its main leaders. Riel was Métis, meaning his ancestry was a mixture of both French, Canadian, and Indigenous First Nation. In 1885, he helped found and lead the provisional government of Saskatchewan on land traditionally inhabited by Métis.
Métis.
Okay, Métis. I'm not French.
I happen to know some individuals who are Métis.
Okay.
So that's the only reason why I know.
Well, again, pronunciation, not Nate's strong suit. Anyway, after a series of battles, the provisional government was defeated by Canadian troops, and the country had been in existence for just 62 days. Riel was subsequently captured, convicted, and hanged. He was seen by Anglophone Canadians as a traitor, but the Métis, First Nations, and Francophone Canadians have long viewed him as a heroic martyr. And I will say I don't often hear the term Francophone, but Francophone literature is very interesting, and I highly recommend you check some out because they had a bunch of Francophone literature. I took a class where I had to read a bunch of it, and a lot of it originated from French-controlled islands in the Caribbean, but they were all French-speaking, hence Francophone, and controlled by France. Yeah, but very interesting stuff.
I would like to read that because I enjoy Latin American literature from the Revolutionary era as well. It's,
sure, yeah.
Very interesting stuff, and I like French literature from that era also. So
this one I wish I could have you pronounce, Mike. Tanganyika. Tanganyika. Okay, not so bad if I slow down and read it. This one lasted from December 9th, 1962 to April 26th, 1964. So there was a settlement in the area that dates back to the 10th century, but it was colonized by the Germans in the 1880s, and it officially became a protectorate in 1891. It was part of German East Africa, which is modern-day Rwanda, mainland Tanzania, Burundi, and part of Mozambique. This land was about 3 times bigger than Germany itself. The Germans came over and officially took charge of the country due to a local revolt against the German colonial company, and by the time World War I ended, Britain had taken control of the country, calling it Tanganyika Territory in 1920. Belgium received the other land, which comprised of German East Africa. The name for the new territory was derived from 2 Swahili words which meant sail and wilderness. There was a lake within this country. In 1962, Britain granted independence to Tanganyika, like it did for many of its former colonies, sometimes with a little prodding. And the new republic didn't last long as the government decided to join with Zanzibar to form what is now known as Tanzania, which we talked about the Zanzibar earlier. I don't know if you ever heard of this next country, Mike, the Provisional Government of Hawaii.
No, I've never heard of Hawaii.
I've heard it's a lovely place. Somewhere
really?
south of us.
Sounds like a hellhole, like a hell on earth, the exact opposite of paradise.
I hear they have Tyrannosaurus Rex and velociraptors and things. Anyway, filming location for Jurassic Park for anyone that didn't get the in reference. January 17, 1893 to July 4th, 1894. About 100 years of living under a monarchy, the opposition to the throne in Hawaii rebelled, angry at a number of different issues springing up during King David Kalukua's reign. When he died in 81. He died in 1980. No, I'm kidding. When he died in 1891, his sister, not going to pronounce her name, succeeded him as queen. She was the first and last female ruler in Hawaii. Her reign would not last long as she was overthrown by a coup in 1893, which was 2 years later. Led by a Committee of Safety, a secret organization devoted to overthrowing the native Hawaiian government, the rebels took over the country. Their main gripe was that the sister was attempting to restore native rights, and they felt that annexation by the United States made the most economic sense for Hawaii. Guess who the committee was made up of, Mike?
A bunch of Americans.
White businessmen and politicians. They received assistance in their rebellion from the Marines aboard the USS Boston, a move which was deemed illegal at first, even by the U.S. House of Representatives. But that was overlooked when it was clear that the United States would need a port for refueling during naval warfare in the Pacific. A new government, the Republic of Hawaii, was later formed in 1894 after annexation efforts were stymied. The president of that short-lived country was Sanford B. Doyle, a cousin once removed from the founder of the Dole Food Company.
Strange. It's almost like they owned a lot of plantations and they grew like pineapples and shit there.
Like they owned a lot of states' rights there, right?
Seems to be a trend.
All right. Good times. United States of Belgium. Have you heard of this one, Mike?
I haven't, but I like it already. At least half of it is good.
Yeah, the and of. Okay. January 11, 1790 to December 2nd, 1790. There were a bunch of reforms by the Holy Roman Emperor Joseph II. I'm going to just call him Joseph II. It's probably Joseph II, right? Joseph II, Joseph II. I don't know. Call him whatever you want. Joe. Sleepy Joe. Holy Roman Emperor Sleepy Joe. Emperor Joe put a bunch of reforms on the Belgian provinces of the Austrian Netherlands, many of which broke existing treaties, so they rose up in revolution in 1789. They declared themselves a sovereign nation known as the United States of Belgium. So there are two groups, the conservative statists and the progressive vonkists. They banded together to form the government as well as the army. They captured a bunch of cities, issued their Declaration of Independence in January of 1790, and they were pretty much successful for a few months, but they weren't ever recognized by other countries. The newly formed United States stood as an example to the rebels, with the Declaration of Independence and Articles of Confederation serving as a template for Belgium's own documents. But there was infighting among the two factions, and a conquest by Holy Roman Emperor Leopold II, or Leo II, Leo II, whatever, took over, and he took over after his brother's death in 1790. The country fell apart. But it sparked an independent spirit in the people of the area in 1830. The country of Belgium declared its independence from the Netherlands during the Belgian Revolution. So, there you go. The Kingdom of Lithuania.
I've heard of Lithuania, but not the Kingdom of Lithuania.
Sure. Well, this was prime peak Mike era. This was February 16th, 1918 to November 2nd, 1918.
Peak Mike era.
Where were you on the shooting of Mussolini? Okay. I was there. When Germany was given control of Lithuania after the Treaty of Brest-Litovsk. The Treaty of Brest. I got distracted by the breast, man. Fuck. Okay.
Breasts. The Treaty of Breasts. Yes, the Treaty of Breasts were signed.
With large tracts of land. Germany was given control of Lithuania after some treaty, right, in 1918. The local government wanted to preserve their status as an independent nation, and Germany wanted to combine Lithuania and Prussia into a larger country, as well as create a sort of USSR of Germany, as was pretty much in the fashion of the time, creating a USSR. That was like the hip thing to do. So the local government declared their independence and started devising plans to appease the German Empire, led by Kaiser Wilhelm II. And he's the one that does that famous scream in all the fucking movies you hear. The Wilhelm scream. That was Kaiser Wilhelm II, just so you know. Against the objections of a large portion of the government, the Taryba, which is the Council of Lithuania, elected Duke Wilhelm von Urach as King of Lithuania, giving him a 12-point proposal to become king, and formed a constitutional monarchy. The Duke took the name of Mindaugas II. The newly crowned king never set foot in his new country, but he did spend the summer learning Lithuanian, as it was one of the requirements of the Lithuanian proposal. Annoyingly so. The Germans had their own reservations, stating the country didn't have the right to elect its own leaders, but World War I was winding down, and the Germans were warming up to the idea of an independent provincial government in Lithuania. On November 2nd, 1918, the Taryba withdrew their invitation to the Duke of Urach and disbanded the government, thereby ending the monarchy. Seems like the plot of Knight's Tale.
That seems like a country that never was, is what that seems like to me. Yeah.
Let me do some admin work on this cigar here. Peeling off the label is considered admin work.
Well, it's real work, you know?
Yeah. The rest of this is just fun, but the real work is maintaining the smoke. The Republic of Formosa, May 23rd, 1895 to October 21, 1895. In the aftermath of the First Sino-Japanese War and the Treaty of Shimonoseki, Japan had been given control over Taiwan by the Chinese, which infuriated the inhabitants of the island. So in May 1895, they declared their independence from Japan, and they called their new republic the Republic of Formosa. A fighting force was gathered, and the islanders vowed to fight the Japanese if they dared to come to Taiwan. Messages were sent out, pleading for international recognition and support. Who should send a battleship and some officers? Fucking France. It's France. France sent a battleship and some officers to talk with the Republic's leaders. But the rest of the international support never came, and the Formosans were soundly defeated by the Japanese military in a matter of months. So, there you go. Azawad. Then this one's fairly recent. Holy shit. April 6th, 2012 to July 12th, 2012. It was never officially recognized by another country, with the people of northern Mali, a country in northwestern Africa, rebelled against the government, declared their land a sovereign nation. They were desiring an Islamic nation devoted to Sharia law. The rebels were well-trained and well-armed. They defeated the government's forces in early skirmishes of the revolution, and it lasted mere months until they were kind of run out of their last stronghold, which was the city of Ansogo. The Republic of Mountainous Armenia. April 26, 1921 to July 13th, 1921. So they were soundly defeated by the Turkish army in the Turkish-Armenian War. The government of Armenia was forced to join Soviet Russia. The Soviets decided to cede parts of Armenia to Azerbaijan, which angered the locals in the area. So in early 1921, they revolted against the Soviets and declared their independence. They controlled the city of Yerevan as well as the surrounding area, setting up a sort of escape route for members of the Dashnak government and other intellectuals who feared persecutions from the Soviets. However, the success didn't last long, as the far superior Soviet army arrived shortly afterward and routed the rebels known as the Armenian Revolutionary Federation. The revolution was partly successful, though, as they were granted a concession by the Soviets, they were promised their territory would remain under Armenian control, but it would still be part of the USSR. Then we've got the Democratic Republic of Yemen, May 21st, 1994 to July 7th, 1994. So civil war happened in Yemen between the northern and southern states when Ali Salim al-Baith, the former vice president of the Republic of Yemen, fled to the southern city of Aden in August 1993 with a list of grievances he wished to have fixed. So, Mike, from what I've heard is we can just go into the woods, we can have a list of grievances and become our own nation. Why are we not doing this?
I mean, I think the biggest issue now is the electric and internet grid and possibly the water grid, depending on what state you're in.
I thought it was because we weren't Daddy's special boy. So after a tank battle in April 1994, the representatives of the southern states seceded, declaring themselves the Democratic Republic of Yemen just a few days later. The name is not to be confused, absolutely not to be confused with the People's Democratic Republic of Yemen, the 23-year-long country which existed in the southern half of Yemen. This is the year-long, the less than a year. This is June, July. This is the 3-month republic. We're not talking about the 23-year republic. We're talking about the 3-month republic. The Civil War lasted only over a little month, and the northern forces crushed the southern resistance, and they captured Aden, the capital city, in July 7th, 1994, which effectively ended the rebellion. We've got the Carpatho-Ukraine. Have you heard of this one, Mike?
No, I don't think so.
Okay. This is March 15th, 1939 to March 16th, 1939. So a little longer than that one that started at noon and ended by like 4 p.m. in time for dinner at the nursing home.
Yes. That one is the Russian Federation or whatever. That is well known because of the Russian Revolution in general.
Well, yeah. So this was formed from the southwestern tip of Ukraine. Carpatho-Ukraine declared its independence on March 15th, 1939. It was largely symbolic in nature. The Voloshin government created the nation just one day after Slovakia declared its independence, although I guess that was a ruse so that Nazi Germany could invade and take over the country. But they designed a flag and state seal, as well as declared a national anthem, all in one day. Much like Hitler and the Nazis, the leaders of Hungary, neighbors to Carpatho-Ukraine, had their minds set on expansion and invaded the newly formed country just a day later. Hitler himself had agreed to a deal which secretly gave Germany's acceptance of this plan. The members of the Carpatho-Ukraine government, fearing for their lives, fled the nation they had just created. It was disbanded and swallowed by the Russians after World War II. Kingdom of Corsica, 1736. Theodor Stephen Freiherr von Neuhoff was an adventurer at heart. He was born in 1694 to a German noble family, and he joined both the French and Swedish armies. And he was involved in various international intrigues, married a lady-in-waiting to the Spanish queen, but married life didn't suit him. And so not long after they were married, he abandoned his wife to wander around Europe some more, because it's so massively huge, of course. In Genoa, he met a group of rebels and exiles from the island of Corsica who were fighting the Genoese for control of their homeland. Despite having no military of his own, Theodore promised to help them if they made him king. Which seems like a reasonable request, right?
Why not?
Well, I have no army, but I'll help you if you make me king. So, he borrowed enough money to afford arms and ammunition, and the Kingdom of Corsica was born. At first, King Theodore I and his rebels had some luck. He set up a court, started printing money, and knighted various family members, but then his luck turned. There was a price put on his head by the Genoese, and the king ran for it after only 8 months. He spent the rest of his life in and out of debtors' prisons until he signed over his theoretical rights to his kingdom to pay off his creditors. The epitaph on his gravestone points out the irony of his life with the lines, "Fate poured its lessons on his living head, bestowed a kingdom, and denied him bread." So it's got to be true because it rhymes. This next one I feel like you've heard of, Mike.
Okay. Let's try it out.
Well, let's give it a go, right? The Sovereign Principality of Elba.
Yeah. Yes, I have.
1814 to 1815. The first time Napoleon was beaten, everyone felt bad for him because he was a genius commander. He needed to be punished, but there was no need to be vindictive. So, according to the Treaty of Fontainebleau, he was exiled to the tiny island of Elba off the Italian coast. And he was allowed to be the non-hereditary monarch of that piece of land until he died. It was pretty much a big step down from Emperor of France, but it was still something. He kept calling himself king and ordering people about, and he got 2 million francs a year. So I don't know, you're exiled on an island. What are you doing with 2 million francs a year? I don't know. I know francs, whatever. But you know what? Napoleon wasn't happy with that, and he fled Elba for the mainland, where he managed to revive his empire for 111 days. But it's known as the 100 Days now. And his enemies weren't thrilled about this and took back the title they had given him. Then Napoleon was defeated for real at Waterloo, and this time there was no award for being a good loser. On St. Helena, another small island, but much further from the mainland, he was not in charge, with the governor of the island calling him General Bonaparte at all times. All right, we're getting quite near the end now, Mike, which I'm sure you're excited about. Maybe. How's your cigar doing?
In more ways than one. I have 1.5 inches left, something like that.
Yeah, I got maybe...
It's starting to get sour.
Yeah, I got about 2 inches left, so we'll see. It's not delightful now. It was good up until about now. 5-10 minutes ago, whatever. Kingdom of Araucania and Patagonia, 1860 to 1862. The Mapuche, probably not how it's pronounced, Mapuche, which are a group of indigenous inhabitants off the southern area of South America, were having trouble with Chile and Argentina trying to take their land away from them. And guess who should show up, Mike? Who do you think it could be?
The French?
Yep. In 1860, a French lawyer and adventurer named Orlais Antoine de Tunens, or something like that, was in the area and heard about the tribe's issues. He talked with the leaders, and they wanted to elect him king all of a sudden, for no reason, in the hopes it would give their claims more legitimacy in other countries' eyes. So the French guy wasted no time in setting up a capital, designing a flag, and printing money. The neighboring countries still refused to recognize the Mapuche state, and they arrested him. But guess what? The Frenchman escaped, and then he was captured again. And the authorities decided he must be insane if he thought he was the king of his own country, and they put him in an asylum. But he eventually got out and went back to France, but he never stopped trying to get his kingdom back. In fact, he selected a French champagne salesman as heir to his throne. The most recent monarch purchased the title for himself and even managed to get it on his passport. But he died in 2014, and there are 2 different people currently fighting for the throne, which is weird, because that was like 1860 and 1862. But what do you do?
Yeah, rich people problems.
Yep, the Republic of Maryland, 1854 to 1857. In the early 1800s, slaveholders and abolitionists found a common cause. Groups both thought that free black people should go back to Africa, albeit for different reasons. The slaveholders thought free blacks would cause trouble and incite slave revolts. Abolitionists, on the other hand, worried about the discrimination they knew free blacks would face if they stayed in the United States. They thought it would be best if free blacks built a new home for themselves, so the 2 groups formed the American Colonization Society and started new countries on the west coast of Africa. as one does, right? Among its other goals, it hoped that the colony would also bring civilization and the gospel to Africa. Most free blacks had no intention of leaving the United States, since by that point their families had been there for generations, and they were as American as any other white person. But thousands did go, and one of the colonies they went to was the Republic of Maryland. In 1836, the colony appointed its first black governor, John Brown Russwurm, and for 20 years things ran smoothly until in 1854 the colony declared independence. Just 2 years later, they began to be attacked by local tribes for interfering with the slave trade, and they had to ask nearby Liberia for help, which led them to becoming part of that country.
Goddamn locals and their interference in the states' rights.
Indeed.
It's almost like they didn't want to enjoy the lifestyle that states' rights brought them.
All right, and the last one, absolute. The last one here is the Republic of Sonora, 1854. Have you heard of this one, Mike? I don't think your CHAZ thing is on here, so we're going to do this one, and then you tell me about CHAZ.
All right, we're going to talk about the CHAZ. Yeah, no, I have not.
Okay. We'll do this one quick. CHAZ to you, and then we'll do final thoughts on the cigar and set up our next episode as we do. In 1853, an American journalist named William Walker petitioned the Mexican government for a bit of land. He wanted to use that land to create a colony that would serve as a buffer between the United States and some Native American tribes. But surprise, surprise, Mexico really wasn't that interested in handing over a chunk of their country. But this did not stop Walker. He went to San Francisco and started recruiting people to help him take the land by force. Because, Mexico has all that land. Why would they just give some? Just share. Share, man. Okay, so 45 men signed up. And so he decided that he should attack the tiny capital of Baja, California. He also claimed the neighboring area of Mexico, even though he never actually controlled it, and declared the whole thing the Republic of Sonora. Fearful of retaliation by Mexico, attacked by Native Americans, and short on supplies, Walker's men started deserting him. Surprise, surprise, because you have 45 dudes, man. But he found himself back in San Francisco, and despite the fact that the city had been a big fan of the new republic, selling bonds in his name and even raising its flags in some places, his actions violated the peace treaty signed after the Mexican-American War, which we talked about at the very beginning of the episode with the Republic of Texas. Walker was put on trial for conducting an illegal war, but this was the period of manifest destiny when people thought it was God's will that the United States take all the land it wanted until it reached the Pacific, and that's probably why the jury took 8 minutes to acquit Walker of all charges. Did Walker learn his lesson? No. After he was acquitted, he went to Nicaragua, where he established a dictatorship that was recognized by American President Franklin Pierce. And we don't hear enough about Franklin Pierce. But soon he alienated some enemies, neighbors, and also business interests. And do you know what happened to him?
He was assassinated?
No, he just found himself at the wrong end of a firing squad, Mike.
Pretty close.
Yeah. Talk to me about CHAZ. Republic of CHAZ. Is it Republic of CHAZ or just CHAZ? Just CHAZ would be more badass.
The CHAZ.
Sweet.
The Capitol Hill Autonomous Zone, also known as the CHAP, which is the Capitol Hill Occupied Protest. This is an area. Do you remember this?
Well, it's different than CHUD, which is Cannibalistic Humanoid Underground Dwellers, which is a fantastic movie, by the way. But is this the Occupy Wall Street stuff?
Yeah. No, it's not. I want to watch that movie, so we should hook that up.
Hell yeah.
No, this was an area of Seattle, several blocks wide.
Yeah, Seattle. Sorry.
That was taken over from June 8th to July 1st of 2020 after the murder of George Floyd. Yes. And it's tied in with the Black Lives Matter movement and the defund the police movement.
Sure.
And a large section of Seattle was taken over by protesters who pushed all the police out, and they used fireworks and rocks and things like that, and they pushed all the police out, they put up barriers, and they created a zone called a Free Capitol Hill.
Sure.
Or the CHAZ. Now, this is a self-organized space without official leadership. They would have little committees, and they would make their rules. And, of course, they were for many political things like open borders. They wanted to defund the Seattle government and put money towards underserved communities. They wanted to lower the city budget by 50%. They had all these demands, all these liberal demands.
Sure.
Of course, what ended up happening was that the CHAZ turned into a rape, murder, and pillage zone.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
they created a police force. After they kicked the police out, they created their own police force.
Yep.
And then because they had a bunch of people who were infiltrating, they created strong borders that protected their autonomous zone from outsiders.
Yeah, we want open borders for everybody but us.
So after declaring that they were against the police forces and open borders, or they were against police forces, for open borders, and for limited government, they instantaneously created a dictatorship with police forces and very strong borders.
Uh-huh.
And eventually it just fell apart and they dispersed.
Yes.
And I figured you'd be talking about the CHAZ because that was hilarious. Very, very funny.
I went a little more historical and not quite so modern, even though there was one on there from like 2012. But
Oh, sure. Well, yeah, and they established a co-op where they had free water and food and sanitizer and community services. And,
Yeah.
of course, they allowed city workers in to, like, do maintenance.
yeah, because they're not about that. They're not about that.
They wanted...
They're,
They
conceptual
wanted
people.
waste removal. Yeah, they allowed the city to do waste removal, portable toilets, and fire and rescue services. So they weren't exactly autonomous.
No.
They
They weren't necessarily
Very
seeking international recognition either.
They were not seeking international recognition. They more or less wanted to affect the city government of Seattle. And like I say, simultaneously wanted to lower their taxes by 50%, but also reallocate the funds to like poor communities in the city.
Sure.
Which you can only have so many things, right? You can have high taxes and nice things, or you can have no nice things and low taxes.
Yep.
You can't have both. So
Yeah, it sounds like people that weren't used to administering things and then found out administering things cost money and time and effort and not just good
they
vibes.
quickly realized that a place without police would have rampant gun violence and like
It doesn't make sense to me.
sexual
Mike.
assaults and violence in general.
It's not tracking.
Like randomly, they quickly found out that you needed police and closed borders and control if you wanted a place that was nice. Weird, really weird.
Strange how that works out.
Yeah, you can't just have an open party.
I mean, like
all the time.
That's the whole point of the government is to secure the borders and protect the populace. Ideally. I mean, we can get into the weeds on it and whatnot, but that's the basic premise of government. That's the reason you would have a government, whether it's like a tribal chief or a president or a king or a parliament or a Congress. It's a protection thing. You can't really have. It's sad to say. You should be able to, right? Like if everybody had the same morals and values and whatever, you should be able to have a place that didn't really care about borders or police forces because everybody would behave morally, but people don't behave morally, so you kind of need something.
Right. And I mean, being on the side of law and order is a cliche. However, if you're not in a place where people are socialized to govern themselves in an appropriate fashion, you do need to have an enforcement arm of the rules. Yeah. And that's a fact.
Well, I just put my cigar out, Mike.
My cigar is out as well.
What are you giving this one? This one's tough, I think. It was pretty decent the first 3 quarters. Trying to hone in on what I think. I don't know. I'm gonna give it a 3. I don't know.
Oh, you were more generous than I give it a 2.65. I was gonna do 2.75.
Sure,
but too much of that cigar. It was a 3 up until the middle.
I'll give it a 275.
And then it slowly started to degrade. And that last inch and a half was pretty much unsmokable.
Yeah.
2 inches it started to get really bad.
Kind of nasty. I felt really good about most of it, and that's why I initially said 3, but I'll drop it to 2.75 because it's just not quite there in terms of like even the Schizo Toro that we did, and we both gave a 3. Like, this is not better than that. This is not the same as that. This is like slightly not as good as that. So
yes, this is like the 4 that was a 3 until halfway through, then turned to a 4, then turned into a 5.
Yeah,
but the reverse.
Yeah, the inverse of that. So it's I don't know. I don't know what the price point on this one was.
$2.
Oh, for $2, it's not bad, I guess. Right? Like $2.
It's a very budget cigar.
Yeah, if you like the milder and the mellower, and you're fishing or whatever, and you don't want to smoke the end 4 inches or 3 inches.
It's a perfect cigar for fishing specifically, because if you catch a big fish, you can throw it into the lake. It costs nothing.
Yeah.
And you're not out anything.
It's
half of it's garbage anyway.
And the first bit of it is the best bit. The first half is the best half.
Exactly.
And the rest of it, not so much. So, yeah, that was the shortest lived countries. Join us next week. We have a very special guest on, probably, I don't know if I'm overstating it, probably the preeminent expert on the D.B. Cooper case, for anyone that is familiar with that. If not, tune in next week where we get the full scoop on D.B. Cooper and the 1971 hijacking. Looking forward to that. Otherwise, give us a like, a listen, give us a review if you're feeling overly generous. Check out our Patreon, our website. We posted a couple episodes ago. We had the Sin Guessing game. We've got the whole transcript online on our Patreon. You can check it out for free. And thanks for listening.
Be safe, have fun.